Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are BaltimorePositive.com. Make sure all of you new YouTubers out there who've been watching us, set a spot on your radio dial. We can even be number 6, number 8, number 12. We'll be on the second panel after the Q and 98 Rock and POC now that Lori DeYoung's gone. I think I am the longest tenured radio voice in Baltimore now. 34. I'll be 34 years very soon. Luke Jones is going to join us now. I'm going to sound better than him. And I know you're thinking, like, you never sound better than him. He's Luke. You're Nestor. He's a media member, and you're whatever you are. Luke's a little under the weather. At least the Ravens aren't under the weather right now, and you hope that the Browns are under the weather on Saturday afternoon. We are going to get to baseball. We are going to get to Corbin Burns. We're going to get to Mr. Rubenstein and Mike Elias and Japanese pitchers and all of that. But it is a football week here. And as it turns out, dude, we're getting together in perfect timing because they moved the game up a day and a half on us after I fell asleep on that Atlanta Commanders game on Sunday night because I had a lot of football. All of Christmas Day, I had no Christmas dinner in my house. You know why? My wife landed at 3:00. We weren't going to make a ham. It was 8:00. It was like, we skipped Christmas. We went to the Beaumont, had a delicious steak the other night. It's fine. We skipped Christmas for the National Football League. Then he put a game on Thursday night. Then he put 2 games on Saturday. Then they put, remember the old music place? They would have the albums in the back that were cut up. All the games on Sunday were like the cut up albums. They were like the ones that, like, you don't really want this, but it'll still play. And it did play. And then we got a schedule, and lo and behold, I guess they think we matter because we're playing early on Saturday, and a Raven loss to kick off the weekend would create some disarray for the Steelers and some other things, right?
It would, but
It ain't gonna happen. I know that.
the early line had the Ravens as an 18-point favorite. Now, I think a lot of that's based on if Dorian Thompson-Robinson starts, who I've seen enough. I've seen enough of that guy. He can't play. That organization, and look, it would behoove them to lose, quite frankly, but they can't look at anyone with a straight face and say that their best chance to win is putting him out there. But so I think that's a big reason why it's 18. So if Jameis Winston ends up starting, which we know Jameis Winston earlier this year, he did it against the Ravens, gives them at least some semblance of a fraction of a puncher's chance.
Well, they're trying to
Saturday.
lose, right? At this point.
I
They
mean,
don't really want to win because of draft picks, and nobody needs a quarterback more than them, I guess. I don't think they're going to come back and make Jameis Winston their guy and win 5 more games next year and have him throw 28 interceptions, right? That's the way I look at Jameis Winston at this point. Somebody would have looked at Sam Darnold that way last year, right? So somebody would have looked at
Geno Smith.
Smith. I was going to say
He's been better than that, but
right, but he was given up on. My point is,
Sure.
Baker Mayfield, by the way, I looked at him yesterday and I literally thought out loud, and this is a fun little conversation for us to, can you win a Super Bowl with Baker? Might the Buccaneers be the team the Ravens face once they get through this gauntlet? Because Baker Mayfield's one of those guys, like, I don't think you can win a Super. That's where we are this time of year. There's Josh Allen, there's Mahomes, there's Lamar. Everybody thinks Joe Burrow can win a Super Bowl, but his team can't get in the playoffs, right? But, quarterbacking at this point, when you look at the body of work and how many quarterbacks every organization goes through and who was playing on Sunday, including Tyrod Taylor, Snoop Huntley, and don't laugh, Joe Flacco too. That's a trifecta there. You want to bet on something? Bet on it. Bet. You want to get me to bet on something? Get me to bet on 3 former Raven quarterbacks starting in Week 17 in the National Football League.
Well, I'll give you the rundown on each of them. Snoop Huntley, compared to DTR, looked like Dan Marino. Joe Flacco turned the ball over a couple times. Wasn't very good, but was way better than the Indianapolis defense, who should have had to walk back to Indy after they gave up 40 plus to the Giants. PU at a game that they needed to win. And then Tyrod Taylor was replacing Aaron Rodgers, who I saw had one of the lowest QBRs. That's ESPN's passer rating, kind of a little more extensive. Had one of the lowest ever in a game where they just got throttled by the Bills. So not a great day for former Ravens quarterbacks. But you mentioned Baker Mayfield. He's had a hell of a year. Go look at the numbers he's put up in that
Well, he
offense.
was a 1-1, and I start to think like it took Goff a minute to become Goff, right? Monday Night
Sure,
Football.
more than a minute.
It took Matthew Stafford 10 years, three coaches, my poor boy Jimmy Schwartz. I mean, Megatron. He had it all, right? And finally, he gets a ring, right? So it all comes in different ways, and as it goes through, we're about to enter the beautiful season here of the playoffs where teams will have a chance to rise, resurrect. Whoever Jaden Daniels, he gets to start his postseason legacy. All of this going on. It's kind of an exciting week. There was a lot of football. Feels like the Ravens played 3 minutes ago, and they're going to play again on Saturday now. And it feels like this game's a walkover to me, right? Like we're not going to talk much about this or take the Browns seriously or take Jim Schwartz or Myles Garrett, and we watch them play on Sunday and they can't get out of their own way. Just got to win Saturday. I don't think there's any layups in the league. And I said to my wife when I was reading the schedule off, I'm like, somebody's gonna, as you like to say, play with their food and get burned. I don't know who it is. It better not be the Ravens. I mean, Harbaugh has no track record really for losing these kinds of games. I mean, there was a Cincinnati game a couple of years ago, but there's no thought that they're not going to win a division and play a home game next week, right?
I
Right.
mean, better not be, right? I
That's the
mean, that
lead story here where you don't have much of a voice.
sure, sure. I mean, but on the flip side, and again, like I said, if Jameis Winston ends up getting the start instead of DTR, Cleveland and the Ravens can both point to the first meeting in Cleveland, which we know there were a lot of circumstances that went on with that in terms of dropped interceptions and Kyle Hamilton, what, two plays, or might have been the play before the game-winning touchdown, and Jameis Winston played well enough, did the things that Jameis Winston does, which is he'll make some great throws, but he'll also throw the football to you, so you have to be ready for it.
He
So
does give the best press conferences in the league these days, though, right? I mean,
oh, I mean, he's certainly entertaining. There's no doubt about that. And like I said, he absolutely gives them a better chance to win than DTR, who I was texting. I think I said it to you as we were texting
yeah,
during the
you
late
text me. You
afternoon
text me.
games.
He's terrible.
He might be the worst that they've had at that position.
Spurgeon win. I mean, we're going through some
I mean,
names.
he's as bad as Spurgeon Wynn. He's as bad as all the backups you can throw out there. Tim Couch. I mean, go down the list of all the, and there've been plenty of bad. We know that. I mean, it's the Browns, but he's that bad. So we'll see. I know Stefanski was non-committal about it, but regardless of who's
Well, are they
playing at
trying to win or
quarterback,
are they not? And I guess
well,
that's a question for all of these Jets and these other organizations to
sure.
say, are yeah, you're out there and you're going to play hard because the coaches coach hard and that's the way we play in this league. But then there's the players that you select to put out there. It speaks volumes for what your franchise agenda is at this point, and the franchise is bigger
Yeah, and let's face it. I mean, they
than
lost plenty of games even with Jameis Winston. I mean, this wasn't a case that they were winning with.
they could have lost 12 games with Flacco this year if they wanted to.
I mean, they'd have a similar record if Deshaun Watson had been their quarterback all year. I mean, that's how bad he was, and they just redid his deal, trying to add some void years to make it a little more tenable with the cap and everything. So it sounds like he's going to be back. But look, regardless of who's playing at quarterback, it's a bad football team. They're banged up. Had a couple other key guys on their defense get hurt on Sunday, and the Ravens are a better version of themselves compared to what we saw when these teams last met. So from that standpoint, yeah, I mean, it's as simple as you're playing early and you need to go out and take care of business. You've had extended rest now. We talked about this with the other side of 3 games in 11 days. They did get a mini bye that was a little bit longer than even your typical Thursday game. So you come back into work this week. By most accounts, it seemed like they were healthy getting out of the Christmas Day win over Houston. So you're healthy. You're getting back to work. You know that you're playing in the first round of the playoffs, but you know that a win on Saturday guarantees that it's a home game. And we've talked about how important it is to have at least that first round home game. And they've done the work since the bye week to secure that to this
Harbaugh's going to
point.
play his brother next week, huh? That'll be prime time, probably Saturday night or Sunday night, right? As I'd see it, anyway.
I mean,
right?
maybe, or it could be Pittsburgh. I mean, that's where there's intrigue, and because I even had a few people ask me, well, why didn't they have the Ravens and the Steelers play at the same time? And I understand that from a division standpoint, but I assume Pittsburgh's going to want to still play because if they win, then they get the Texans rather than the Ravens in the first round, or at least the possibility of the Ravens in the first round. So, and I think anyone who watched Houston play on Christmas Day, you'd rather play the Ravens. I don't care who you
Well, you
are.
also get
So
Joe Burrow and Russell Wilson
no,
on
I'm
Saturday
sorry.
night. I mean, the league doesn't make any mistakes with television. I mean, the league punts on a Sunday night game or a Monday night game. It's because they've been handcuffed by the network and by the schedule and by things. But I can I be really honest with you? This is full forthcoming, and probably wouldn't be
Sure.
the case if I still had my press credential. I didn't know there were Saturday games. I thought that they
Yeah.
played. I just thought
Everything
it's
was
really there's nothing more unfair than John Harbaugh finding out at 11 o'clock last night that he has to play at 4 o'clock on Saturday. Like that. That's just effed up. I mean, I don't know what else to say from a football perspective for the league to do that to any team. I'm not going to sit here and sing the blues for John as an 18-point favorite at 4:30 on Saturday, or for the league and their television, how they're trying to make money and give games to Amazon and Apple and Netflix and Lord knows YouTube, whoever's coming next, right? But it's a little goofy. I mean, like fine, doesn't matter. It matters a lot to the Steelers. They got to play on Saturday night instead of Sunday, and I think it matters to fans who are holding tickets too. Like it's just, I don't know.
well
I'll
the
get on
ticket.
that tangent forever. And it's one thing for baseball to say we're going to play Tuesday, Thursday, Friday at 3 in the afternoon. It's baseball. It's short schedule. The last weekend is a crescendo on that Sunday in October. This is different. This is a bunch of dicks in suits getting together and lawyers and money people doing things that they shouldn't be doing in regard to football. And there's no, much like Chad Steele out there, there's no grown up in the room. There's no grown up to stand up and say, you shouldn't be waiting until 11 o'clock on Sunday night, having 28 teams wondering whether they're playing at 4:30 on Saturday. That's screwed up. That's
I,
all.
I agree. Let me correct something I said when I last I misspoke. I've obviously meant to say that if you're the Steelers, you'd much rather play the Texans than the Ravens in the first round.
Well,
I
right.
think everyone,
The
yeah,
way
but
they've got this scored is the Ravens need to win to secure the division.
right,
Once they do that, the Steelers are going to need to win to be the right
the
seed for
five,
themselves
yeah,
and Joe Burrow, and it's going to be a competitive game, and the
sure.
Steelers don't want to lose. So they pay, and it's great. It's good theater. I mean, Burrow and Russell. It's so they fixed their television thing. I just think from a scheduling standpoint, it's goofy.
Yeah, I think I would be curious to know, and I'll see if I can find out this week. I'd be curious to know if the league told the teams that played on Christmas, or even go as far as the Thursday night game, Seattle, for example, who played the Bears on Thursday night. I wonder if they told those teams, hey, depending on how all this plays out, you might have a higher probability of playing on Saturday.
More susceptible.
Yeah,
Okay, fair
right.
enough.
And because part of this is also, I mean, look, since Wednesday, and obviously the team got some days off, but the coaches were back in there over the weekend, and they're preparing for the Browns. I mean, they knew they were playing Cleveland. It's not like it was a unknown short week mystery opponent, which you can get with the playoffs,
And the
right?
Ravens don't have
So
to get on a plane. The Browns do.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So, from that standpoint, same thing, Bengals, Steelers, neither of them were on a short week. I mean, the Bengals played Saturday. So there's some of that, but your point about the fans, yeah. I mean, this is why I say though constantly, we've had this discussion so many times about Thursday night football, for example, and people complain about it, but what do I always say? If you're going to continue to watch, you're telling the NFL you're fine with it, right? So much of it goes
Everybody
down
I know
to,
canceled their Christmas this year to watch the
yeah,
Ravens play. That's
yeah.
insane.
I mean,
That's
that,
insane.
and I'm
And
not
I'm
saying,
not like a hardcore. You know where I stand on religion. I was raised or Lady Fatima, Catholic, all of that, right? Like my whole lifetime doesn't even matter. You sit there. The thing that made me crazy on Christmas Day was when J.J. Watt's doing the game. Not very good, by the way. It was just kind of terrible, actually, all of it. But saying we need a little violence today, and I'm thinking, dude, it's Christmas Day.
hmm.
It's Christmas Day. Are you profess to be a Christian? All of you do.
Oh,
All of you.
I'm
A
going to
little
push back a
violence
little bit.
today. Like it's just
But
sort
he's
of like,
talking about football, though, man. Like,
yeah,
come on, like
but
there are a
why
lot.
are you playing
That's a
it on
silly
Christmas
thing to
Day? We didn't
criticize
talk.
someone
We didn't
on.
argue about this, and you're the man
That's
way of
silliness.
greater
That's
faith than
you're
Deacon
you're
Jones.
saying that is silliness, though. There's lots of things you can criticize. Come on, man.
Canceling Christmas Day, like for the
Well,
league, and this
I
is
agree
not.
with
This
that,
is
but
now going to be the thing. Christmas is going to be usurped as the day we watch football, like Thanksgiving has been, because they're not going to give it up now. Now that they've done it, they're going to play 3 games on Christmas if they can.
sure, I agree with
So
that.
I
I
doing
think
that to
I think
fan
that was a
bases,
low
doing
blow
that to
saying that to JJ
families.
Watt. I think that's a low blow.
I
But
just think
anyway,
so.
go ahead.
No, he said nothing wrong, a little violent. We need
He's
more
talking in the
violence today.
context of football.
Yeah, but it was
Come on,
two
man.
o'clock on
That
Christmas
is a
Day,
get off
dude.
my lawn moment right there. Come
Well,
on.
okay,
I'm not going to
fair
let you
enough.
go on that one.
Well, I
There's,
just went. I just went. It is a
oh,
game of violence,
it's a
as you
silly
often
thing.
say.
Yeah, right. And we're talking in the context of NFL films and John
It's
Facenda and Harry
Christmas Day,
Callis.
and all of this is
Okay,
like
man.
I wake up and it's Christmas Day, and at 1 o'clock, there's 7.5 hours of stop Christmas, put on a purple hat, let's do violence, let's ignore the family and all watch the little screen. Like it's like I just
I just
if
think
you
that's a
really
silly
are
thing
taking
that
Christmas
comment.
sacredly as a league, then don't stop Pittsburgh and Houston and tell all of them they have to cancel Christmas Day. And if that's get off my lawn 5 days after Christmas from a guy who's not high and holy in any way, I just think
No, I
it
just
it,
meant that
it
specific comment was a silly thing to
but it
criticize him individually.
I'm just saying in the middle of the day I hear it.
Okay,
So I'm saying it. He said
okay.
it, he should own it. That's fine.
It's
He
nothing to own. It's fine. He's doing his job. Anyway, I agree with your general point. I just think that's a silly. They're
Well, this is what happens
attack
when the
the
Ravens are
owners,
an
attack
18-point
Roger
favorite.
Goodell.
We don't even have a game to talk about. You don't even have a voice to talk about it. We haven't even argued about Corbin Burns.
Oh,
Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke. Okay, so what do you have? You had a weekend. I haven't
no,
done radio all
I
week. I just
just
had to vomit
sorry.
all over everybody for wrecking the holiday and playing the games. And now LeBron's going to argue that no, we own
that
Christmas. That's the part that drove me nuts. How
was
about
funny.
Jesus Christ and God and the Holy? How about them owning Christmas? How about something other than commerce not own? How about families owning Christmas? How about that? That's all.
Well,
That
if we're going to
there's my
start going
religious
down that
statement.
road,
There you go.
if we're going to start going down that road, I would say a lot of Christmas is commercialized and
Well,
not sacred.
I
But
don't want to get
anyway,
Deacon Jones on
I
his
let's
pulpit. Get
let's
your
let's
voice back, and then I'll let you come back and yell about that later.
let's pivot because this is more of a last week conversation to complain about the Christmas games. I think what we saw over the weekend, I mean, there's some really, as much as there were some bad games, there were some really good games. I mean, the Denver Cincinnati game on Saturday was wildly entertaining. I mean,
Yeah, teams fighting to make the playoffs.
I think the Bengals, for as much as you don't fear their defense whatsoever, I think everyone, Cincinnati, or not Cincinnati, Kansas City, Buffalo, the Ravens, the three real contenders in the AFC, in my opinion. None of them want to see the Bengals get in. And I don't mean that they're terrified that they can't beat the Bengals, because Kansas City beat the Bengals, the Ravens beat the Bengals twice. But compared to Denver, compared to, even though the Chargers, I think the Chargers are very much ascending. I just think they need a little more talent, skill talent. But
But they're more
compared,
balanced. The Chargers are speak to be a balanced team to me.
yeah. But I think when you're talking about an upside play, when you're talking about a team that's a wild card, going to be on the road, Cincinnati's the team that you look at and say they could knock off one of the heavyweights in the AFC.
Because they can score 35.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And again, that's not to say, let me be clear, and there's still a long shot to get in, because you just look at, they need to win, and they need Miami to lose, right? I mean, they need Denver to lose to Kansas City's backups on Sunday. So they're not in a good spot, but they very clearly are the team that if they sneak in, Buffalo would be nervous as all heck.
By the way, that's
to
another
host
reason
them.
they play Saturday night, right? Because if they win, it creates real pressure on Miami and Denver ahead of time. It puts them in a position. It puts them in a marker if they were to win.
Yeah, I mean, ideally you'd want all those teams playing at the same time, but I think you get to a
They
point
sold
where,
television on Saturday.
yeah,
That's really what
exactly.
happened.
And that's, I mean, I suppose the Ravens Browns is on Saturday because Lamar Jackson is ratings gold. And he might only play 3 quarters if the Ravens are up by 5 touchdowns, but I mean, that it kind of is what it is. But
Well, anybody that has tickets woke up on Monday morning and found out, oh, I'm going to the game Saturday, not Sunday. That's literally what happened in this town.
sure. Well, I mean, I will say, in fairness to the league, they never set a time for any of these games. In the past, they've kind of set times and then they move it around. All along, it's been TBD, either Saturday or Sunday. But did they have to wait till 11:30 on Sunday night? Of course not. But they did, and I assume people will show up around the
They
league
can do
because,
anything they want, which is
right,
obvious where you have a media credential and I don't. I've been the guy on the radio here for of here. So they march to their own beat. We sit here and talk about it. It's all good. But the tournament itself, as it starts at next week, and what teams can and can't, I keep going back to your eternal wisdom of saying they're a bad good team or a good bad team, which I thought was great. I still think about that. And I wonder where the Lions, Vikings, Packers, where all of that is on the NFC side, where the Eagles are without really a quarterback right this minute. Now, you think Hurts gets back 2 weeks from now and will be able to play. But that's also an interesting side of the bracket. The AFC side is going to be a dog show, right? Like just from the very beginning of the Harbaugh brothers getting together here, probably the Steelers going down to Houston, the Bills who can't play defense right now are going to probably play the Broncos, I guess. I mean, I keep that. Yeah, guess the Broncos will beat the Chiefs this week. So when I try to like stack up next week and the actual tournament, we'll have time to talk about that. But health, weather, emerging quarterbacks, right? Veteran coaches like Harbaugh and Tomlin and Reed and Sean Payton probably in this thing as well. So it's going to make for a nice, colorful tournament next week where, sure, nobody thinks they can beat Patrick Mahomes really, but Lamar might and Josh Allen might. And the NFC is going to send somebody, and it might be Baker Mayfield, who I didn't even talk about, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, I think in the AFC, I think it's pretty clear cut who the three heavyweights are, who the three most serious contenders that I think most people would perceive. I think that's pretty clear. I mean, Pittsburgh has shown you who they are at this point, and until they get off the mat, they look like a team that's fallen apart in the month of December, which, by the way, is something the Steelers have done low key done a lot of here in the last 6, 7 years. Go look at their December record. It typically involves a losing streak of this
They lost
magnitude.
to three playoff teams in a row.
But I mean, yeah, but that kind of
They're a
certifies them.
bad good team.
They're a pretender, right? I mean, they're a playoff team. They're legit. I mean, I'm not.
Well,
They're
good
a
team
legit
means you're a
playoff
playoff
team.
team. So a bad good team means that you're a visiting playoff team.
Yeah, yeah,
Makes
yeah.
sense.
But yeah. So you look at the top three in the AFC, and you just said it. I mean, I'll say this much, and I had a chance to watch that Minnesota Packers game. I think the Vikings have been such an interesting team all year because of expectations of where they were. They draft J.J. McCarthy. They have Sam Darnold becomes their quarterback because McCarthy's out for the year. It's been this journeyman. He hasn't even been able to stick as a backup in recent years. And not only has he had this really good season, I mean, he's had a good season. Like, this isn't like, oh, they've carried him. He's played really well. And I mean, the Vikings, they took care of business. And I know Green Bay made it interesting at the end, but they really have taken care of business. They're 14-2.
These
I mean,
teams
they're
that don't win by enough and don't get enough style points, they only win by a touchdown. He's 9-1 in one score game. I'm like, all right, like you don't win by 18 every week. You just don't
right.
in the league. And as much as we've seen Lamar boat race teams over the last 6 or 7 years and the '99 Rams, that's not normal. And I think when you're winning close games every week, I don't know, it speaks to leadership and it speaks to holding your water in a way where you're not the one fumbling the ball. You're not the one coming up short of the sticks. You're not the one having bad challenges and bad timeouts and penalties and just all of those things that make you lose a 3-point game you should have won against Cleveland or Las Vegas or whomever. By the way, my wife was watching the Browns. She turned to me. She hadn't watched a lot of football this year. She really had. I mean, she's a little sour about giving 20 years of her life and all that money and time, and her ass still hurts from there. So she doesn't watch a lot of football, but she sat and watched the Browns. She turned to me. She's like, "Oh my God, they're awful." And I'm saying, yeah, I'm like, yeah, they're pretty bad, like she said, how did the Ravens lose to them? And I'm like, I'm surprised she knew they lost to them, but she does.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely plenty of that. But to go back to what I was saying about the Vikings, I mean, they're going to play Detroit in the Sunday night game, and both those teams, I mean, you're talking about two lost teams, right? I mean, you're talking about teams that have been really, really, really good, and you're talking about two teams that, especially in the case of the Lions, they've been bad most of my lifetime. I mean, even someone
Most
listening
all.
who's, yeah, I mean, save for a couple years, right? I mean, a couple decent years under Jim Caldwell, a couple decent years with Barry Sanders in his prime, and that's it. right? I mean, that's what you're
I
talking
remember when they
about
lost the championship game to the Redskins down in DC.
by a
I guess
lot,
that's like
right?
91,
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah, man.
yeah.
Like I remember that because I was on the radio then. That's it's how long I've been on the radio, dog. Wayne Fonts, Bobby Ross, just
Oh yeah.
all of that, right? And um yeah, we've had Eric Hipple on the show and from time, Gary Danielson from time to time. The Lions story is the best story in the league by far. And them in the Super Bowl would be historic in a historic kind of way, in a way that I don't think people here really appreciate the Honolulu Blue and all of that. And I remember when Jim Schwartz got the job there, he said to me, we were over his place in St. Michael's, and he said to me, you do know, like if you talk to the people at the Detroit Free Press about clicks, Hockey Town and the Red Wings and the Pistons and the Bad Boys and the Tigers and all that, the Lions by far are 5-1 the bigger brand than any of those brands. They just have stunk forever. Everyone loves the Lions, but the Lions have given them nothing to love. And this was 15 years ago when Schwartz was coaching the Lions, and they are that sleeping giant of a franchise that's never been awakened, kind of like the Browns, but the Browns are more obvious to us than the Lions really are as a big brand. But Detroit's a big place with a lot of people, a lot of displaced people, Michiganers everywhere, which is why you always see Tigers hats when they're in town and what. Behind every one of those Tigers hats is a poor Lions fan that ain't had anything to cheer about since Greg Landry. Like so that to me, and seeing even their draft having 500,000 people down there for the draft and the like all of that, Detroit is a sleeping giant of a football town that's never been awakened. That now this is their month. They better own it, dude. To your point, they've never been any good. Now that they're good, the level of expectations to the roof. They better win on Sunday night. They better not cough up the one, right? That's
Well, I
that. That's
was
a death knell. They cough up the one at home.
I mean, it's not coughing it up, though. I mean, Minnesota's really good too, and that's kind of my point here. You have these two teams that, in the case of the Vikings, there were no expectations. I mean, they just drafted a quarterback, right? I mean, they just drafted McCarthy. Sam Darnold was going to be a placeholder for 7 weeks or something like that. I mean, that was what they had in mind when they do that. Yet he's played the way he has. The Vikings have played the way they have, and Detroit with Jared Goff, who not like he was a bum in LA. I mean, he took them to a Super Bowl. They lost, but he took them to a Super Bowl. So it's not like he was an utter failure, but certainly has elevated his star since arriving in Detroit. But both these teams, and I'm working under the assumption right now, Detroit takes care of business with Monday night, as you and I are talking about this, as they're playing a 49ers team that's completely depleted by injuries at this point. But that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about two 14-2 teams, if that happens on Monday night, facing off on Sunday Night Football. And the loser doesn't just miss out on the number one seed, doesn't just miss out on home field advantage, but they go on the road
They won't get a
and
home game at all.
they will their their consolation prize is to go to Tampa Bay against that offense in the first round. So, and I get it. I mean, Tampa Bay's 9-7, but assuming they take care of business and they win the division over Atlanta at this point because they're a game up, that's not a great first round draw, considering the way that Buccaneers offense is played. So, boy, you talk about a game with high stakes. I mean, as much as we complain about Ravens Browns 4:30 Saturday national TV game. Like, why, from a competitive standpoint, that game? I mean, my goodness. I mean, talk about theater in the same way that, hey, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it because you did mention Jaden Daniels. I mean, how about that Washington Atlanta game Sunday night? I mean, great football game, really was. And for as much as we talk about all of the quarterback royalty in the NFL being in the AFC at this point in time, when you're talking about Mahomes, Lamar, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and then you kind of get into Justin Herbert and guys of that nature. In the NFC, there isn't as much of that, right? I mean, you've got Goff, Sam Darnold, Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield at this point in time. But my goodness, Jaden Daniels, what he's done this year. And I'll give Michael Penix in his second career start a nod for throwing the game tying touchdown on fourth down to
Well, how about
force
Christmas? As
overtime.
much as I complain about Christmas Day, four teams: Mahomes, Lamar, C.J. Stroud, Russell Wilson, all African American quarterbacks. Sunday night, Penix, Jaden Daniels. I mean, you and I have been watching football a long time. John Eisenberg's book just came out a year ago about black quarterbacks, and I encourage everybody to watch those pieces, listen to those pieces. I was wearing my Warren Moon throwback over at Pappas last year when John was holding the book up and talking about it. But like, this has been a wave of talent and a game changing that we've seen. The revolution. Surprised John doesn't use that one more, and his face isn't on a Che Guevara shirt for the fan base like Hope with Obama. But the revolution of Lamar Jackson and what the league has done, you're seeing the revolution of not just black quarterbacks, but the style of game and the way Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, white quarterbacks are playing the game because the pocket has moved, the players have moved, the athleticism amongst everybody except the front four, and I wouldn't call Namde Matabike or name anybody on the front line not an athlete, not Tony Saragusa notwithstanding, or Michael Pierce, but just in general, the athleticism of the game has moved. The game has changed dramatically from John Elway and Dan Marino, really from Joe Flacco a decade ago, and
Yeah.
from Tom Brady quickly. Tom Brady didn't play this style of game.
No, no, not at all. I mean, playing from the pocket's still important, and that's the part of this. While I agree with everything you just said, go look at the plays that Jaden Daniels made from the pocket on Sunday night. Go look at the plays that Penix made from the pocket on Sunday night as rookies in a huge game with so much on the line. That's impressive. Let alone talking about guys like Lamar and Mahomes who've been doing it for several years
But
now.
they're being taught to read defenses way earlier in life. They're not given a playbook the minute they show up Penix and saying, here's what a pro offense looks like. There used to be a pro offense and a college offense and a
Sure,
Navy offense.
that's
And
it's all
this
there's
has been a
hybrids.
morph.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all hybrid at this point. I mean, even Joe Burrow gets out on his snakes and moves around a little bit because he has to. It doesn't structurally look like the West Coast offense, and certainly doesn't structurally look like Dan Fouts anymore.
Well, I mean, I just think you look at it, all things being equal, and I think Tom Brady would be the first to say this and probably has said this. Who would you rather have? Would you rather have someone who is going to play great from the pocket, but must play from the pocket? Or would you rather have someone who can be maybe not quite that elite from the pocket, but still really good from the pocket? And oh, yeah, when things break down, they can take off and run. I mean, that's what you have with
Well, that's what makes you good in the
Mahomes
pocket is being
and
able to take
Lamar.
off and run and get a 19-yard run when you can't pass the ball. That's something Joe Flacco didn't have the ability to do, right?
Yeah,
Like that
I
era
mean,
of quarterback.
but you just look at all these guys and they have that ability. So it just puts that much more stress on the defense. I mean, someone said it on social media at some point over the weekend. I can't remember who it was, but they were really talking about, taking a step back and recognizing how good this era is shaping up to be in terms of quarterback play. I mean, just look in the AFC, and that's putting aside Jaden Daniels and Penix and some of these other guys that are still on the younger side, right? But right now in the AFC, you have Mahomes and what he's done to this point in his career. You have Lamar, who could be on his way to a third MVP. You have Josh Allen, who could be the MVP if it's not Lamar. And you have Joe Burrow, who statistically has been as good as anyone, right? It's just, I mean, he doesn't play defense, right? So those four alone, when you kind of look at this, I'm thinking back to when has quarterback play been this good from a league-wide standpoint. Now, let me be clear. I don't mean 1 through 32. I mean the top 10 quarterbacks, let's say. Yeah, it's been a while that I feel like it's been this good with this many.
There was a time when Favre was hanging on and
I
Brady
was
was
going
in
to
his
say kind of
prime.
the, I,
Yeah. Roethlisberger, like
yeah,
that era of. I mean, Philip Rivers was a great quarterback. I mean, like that
yeah,
didn't win anything, but was a great quarterback. So, like, I look at that era and say, yeah, we had 8 or 10 in that.
right.
Peyton Manning, Brady, and everybody else. Drew Brees was a part of that. I mean, that was a golden era. And then you go back to the 80s and say the 83 draft and everything Elway, Marino, Montana, that late 80s piece was
Early
also,
90s, yeah.
yeah. And Randall Cunningham was part of that too. Although I don't know he was great at that point, became great.
And
Um,
Warren Moon.
Warren Moon. There you go. So
Yeah,
that
I mean,
that period of time there, there's always well, look, dude, just grab the playoff roster from 1992, 1998,
yeah,
2004, and just look at the 10, 12 teams that are in the playoffs and who their quarterbacks were. And Eli Manning, I guess, is going to get to the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? Like, I guess some of these guys that win will get to the Hall of Fame. But I think if you look through Hall of Fame quarterbacks, you'd see 5 to 8 in any playoff stack, probably, right?
Yeah, I mean, probably. I mean, and let me be clear, I'm not saying it's the best ever what we're seeing right now,
Most athletic ever.
but I do think what you're seeing right now with Mahomes, I mean, he took right over for Brady, right? I mean, the Chiefs have taken right over for the Patriots at that point. And until someone beats them, that's kind of the way it is right now.
By the way, they're
Buff,
the 1 seed. We haven't mentioned them at all because they don't have to play for a couple weeks,
yeah,
literally.
yeah, exactly. I mean, they're going to play their backups, and that's probably going to help the Broncos get into the playoffs. But it is what it is. That's go beat them. But I just think you have Mahomes, you have Lamar, who, if Lamar were playing at other points in time where there wasn't a Mahomes, or we said the same thing about Peyton Manning playing at the same time as Tom Brady, right? I mean, you're always kind of you're compared to your peers, and if you're in an era where you have a guy like that, it's just like, oh, how are you going to beat him? How are you going to get over the top? But that's what Lamar, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow are all dealing with right now, right? And you can throw in some other guys as well, but I just think, especially this year, just look at the numbers those guys are all putting up. I mean, Mahomes has been the weak link of that group statistically, but he's Mahomes, so it is really impressive, and it does remind me. I'll go back to my childhood with the early '90s where Joe Montana, then Steve Young, Dan Marino, John Elway, uh, Warren Moon. I mean, go down the list. I mean, you're talking about Hall of Fame. Troy Aikman, you won 3 Super Bowls. I mean, that's a pretty special era, and I feel like this era is shaping up to be something along those lines for the foreseeable future.
Well,
Because
when you're winning 14 games every year, that speaks to what Brady and Manning did. Flacco couldn't do that. Roethlisberger did a little bit of it. Drew Brees did a lot of it, maybe in a weaker sort of division and playing different kind of opponents there. But, when you're winning 13, 14, 15 games, and throw Lamar into that for this year, notwithstanding the Cleveland and Las Vegas turds that were thrown in, 12, 13, 14 wins every year, to your point, as long as the Ravens have Lamar Jackson, as long as Cincinnati has Joe Burrow, as long as Kansas, but you can't say that about Deshaun Watson. You can't say that about CJ Stroud right now. As long as they have him, they're going to be fine. There is that quarterback comfort level that if you have that guy and he's still not too old, you'll have a chance. I mean, even if he is too old, the Jets went all in on Aaron Rodgers, right? Like, and the question in LA, how long are we going to stay with Matt Stafford? Well,
yeah,
I know what the next round looks like, right? So stick with guys you have that know what they're doing and can do it.
yeah, and I mean, right now, look at the playoff field. Okay, Kansas City. Well, they can win with Patrick Mahomes because they've done it multiple times. Buffalo with Josh Allen. I mean, who are you going to trade Josh Allen for? Same with Lamar with the Ravens. I mean, who are you going to trade Lamar for? Other than Mahomes, right? I mean,
By the
that's
way, you
it.
didn't mention Jim Kelly as great quarterbacks with all of
Jim
that.
Kelly, yeah, no
Yeah, you
question.
didn't even throw him in
Well,
because
I
like they
also
didn't
didn't,
win.
even though he was more mid '90s. I mean, Brett Favre. I mean, go. That's what I mean. Like but this era is shaping up to be pretty special in that way. Especially if Jaden Daniels, if you look at what he's done as a rookie, I mean, my
But look at
goodness.
that era of Brad Johnson's and Chris Chandler's, and I'll put Tony Eason in, but there were some quarterbacks, Trent Dilfer,
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have some
who
of
have
that,
snuck
sure.
in and not been whomever. And if Sam Darnold's that guy this year and he becomes Mark Rippon,
Yeah.
we thought that of Kurt Warner until he had his comeback, right? He's a one-hit wonder or whatever. I don't know. It's hard to do. It's hard to do for what Sam Darnold has done in 1 year. If he never does it again, or even what the Eagles quarterbacks did in 17, Foles and those guys, and piecing that because Carson Wentz started that year. So
Yeah.
piecing that together to win a championship, you do look at it and say, can a Nick Foles win a championship? Can a Trent Dilfer? Because that is how we look at it. That's how we'll measure it. We'll pick the team we like by the quarterback. That's why we all like Mahomes right now, right?
Yeah, and look, I mean, everything you mentioned are still outliers, right? I mean, Trent Dilfer winning a Super Bowl is still an outlier, right? Even back then, that still wasn't the norm.
But it
Now,
happened. The question
it
is, can it
happened.
happen now? And we feel like
I,
there's no chance Baker Mayfield's winning a Super Bowl. Like you just feel that way, and it happens though.
although I will say, I mean, again, go look at Baker's numbers. He's having a really good year. I mean, he's not Trent Dilfer. Trent Dilfer,
He's a
Was what he
1-1.
was, right?
Yeah.
Trent Dilfer was dragged to a Super Bowl by the defense, and he didn't mess it up. God bless him. That's what he was asked to do, and he did it well. But you just look at the AFC right now: Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar. I think everyone signs off on any of those three getting to the Super Bowl, even though Lamar and Josh Allen, they got to beat Mahomes. We know that, right? But CJ Stroud, major step back this year. Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson 10 years ago, sure. Now, no. I'm just, Super Bowl. Not saying these teams can't find their way into a
Hey, dude, I
playoff win.
believe Joe Flacco was going to go down to Houston and beat them last year in the first playoff game, but I didn't think he could win a Super Bowl.
Sure.
There's a point where like they're not good enough to do that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think the Chargers, I think Herbert is absolutely good enough. I'm not sure the team around him is good enough for them to win 3 playoff games in a row at
Boy,
this
they come
point in
in here
time.
next Saturday night with Dobbins and Joe Ortiz and Harbaugh's brother on
Oh,
national TV. I
it's
mean,
spicy.
that's the
Don't get
way
me
it's
wrong.
setting up for me. It's setting up for me to be Harbaugh versus Harbaugh, probably Saturday night because they would like the lights on it all. I mean, the league's going to get that next week.
I mean, they could, but Pittsburgh's got to win for that to happen, right? So we'll see. But Denver, I think Bo Nix has a very promising future. Is he ready to do that now as a rookie? No. So, basically three quarterbacks, 3 teams that are the bona fide super heavyweights, and everyone else is, you know, I give Herbert and the Chargers maybe a slight nod over the others. But then in the NFC, I mean, Sam Darnold, we're gonna find out, right? I mean, they're 14-2. Philadelphia, we've seen Jalen Hurts, albeit now they have Saquon Barkley, which they did not a couple years ago. So I think that makes them even more interesting. The Rams with Stafford. I mean, every time you're ready to write off the Rams, they go on a roll, right? They win some games and suddenly they're in the playoffs. Tampa Bay, we already talked about that with Mayfield. Goff in Detroit, Jaden Daniels, even Jordan Love as the Packers being the 7 seed. They were disappointing on Sunday, but go look at how they played the last 6 or 7 weeks overall. I think the Packers, as 7 seeds go, you don't want to sleep on them. So
Well, they made a comeback in Minnesota, and
yeah,
they made the game interesting. They showed how good they can be in the fourth
yeah.
quarter of that game.
Well, and look at what they did on the road against Dallas in the playoffs last year. I mean, they didn't just beat them; they embarrassed them. So I mean, Jordan Love, I think, is one of those quarterbacks that is frustrating in the sense that at times you see flashes of greatness and playing at an elite level, and then there are other times where he just looks okay, right? So, but that's a lot of young quarterbacks, and I think the NFC is really interesting in that way that you don't have these super heavyweight quarterbacks that are the elite of the elite, but you have a really interesting field and a really interesting collection of quarterbacks. So, and obviously it's not all set 100%, but I kind of went through and kind of viewed the teams that are going to most likely be there. Atlanta still has an outside chance. Seattle was eliminated because of what happened on Sunday. So, we're going to see. But, to bring it back full circle to the Ravens, I mean, other than Mahomes and the Chiefs, and yeah, understanding the Ravens are not in a spot where they're likely to have more than one home playoff game, it's going to be challenging. But, the way they're playing, the way that they're finishing off this regular season, you have to like their odds as much as anyone. I mean, they've have answered the bell coming out of the bye with the way that they've played on both sides of the ball, and now it's a matter of doing what you're supposed to do on Saturday against a horrendous Browns team, and then hey, it's go time after that. Got to win every week. So,
Justice Hill available for the playoff game, maybe?
um, uh, well, I mean, it's a concussion, so I mean, he's got a chance considering that happened against Pittsburgh, right? I mean, all these games are running together because they happened right after each other. So he was concussed on the 21st. So come this weekend, you're talking 2 weeks. I mean, he could be available for
I don't mean
for
this week.
Saturday.
I meant for the playoff game.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm
you
trying to
never know for
figure
sure.
out how. Well, it's 2 weeks from now. So he's the one. Are there any other questions about guys they'd like to get to the field against the Chargers or the Steelers next weekend?
I mean, to project out that far, and obviously concussions, you never know with 100% certainty. Sometimes guys
Well, the
take
Eagles
a
have that
while.
with Jalen Hurts right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, he missed one game. I mean, typically with a concussion, most guys miss one game and then they're back. Now, that is not always the case, however. Nelson Aguilar is an example of that. I mean, Aguilar they thought he had a chance to be back for the Pittsburgh game, and then he wasn't, and then he wasn't even an option for the Houston game. So I think he probably had some symptoms that resurfaced. I would guess. I don't know that for
Sure.
certain, but yeah, health wise, Ravens are in good shape. I mean, they really are. I mean,
Sound
it's
better than your voice.
yes. And let me be clear, I feel way better than I sound for anyone who's concerned. Thank you.
Well, you look
But yeah,
great too, if that matters.
yeah. So, I mean, but hey, this is the time of year, right? No one is truly 100%. Are you healthy enough to play?
I feel
If you
great
are,
today.
then
I do. It's Planet Fitness. I think it's all that carrot juice I drank through the holidays. We got a game at 4:30 this week. We didn't realize that when I went to bed on Sunday night. I thought, they'll play 4 o'clock on Sunday like everybody else. But the league throwing us a little purple curveball with the Cleveland Browns on Saturday afternoon. So check your regularly scheduled programming and the local listings for the game in your neighborhood. Luke and I will be out on Baltimore Positive. You can find us at AM 1570 as well. Maryland Crab Cake Tour back after it next year, which is 5 minutes from now. On the 7th, we'll be up at Lib's Grill next Tuesday in Bel Air. All that brought to you by the Maryland Lottery as well as Jiffy Lube Multicare. Want to say Happy New Year to everybody out there. I think Luke and I will argue a little bit of baseball here as we go into the new year about Corbin Burns. I hope you get your voice back in time to yell at Jim Schwartz on Sunday about not being a home wrecker around here from Arbutus to downtown. He is Luke. He's Baltimore Luke. You can find him anywhere the internet travels. And obviously, you can find my columnist, his writing, all of our work at baltimorepositive.com.